guys, welcome to the Elements Wellness Podcast. We are a group of therapists and coaches that run wellness content and retreats to unleash your you that exists boldly, masters emotions, lets go of thoughts that weigh you down, ignites your inner power, and expands your soul.
Welcome to the Elements Wellness Podcast. I'm Matt Whalen, and I have with me Andrew Taylor, ex-Army soldier. And today we're going to be talking about masculinity. This is a topic that, Andrew, we're probably going to ruffle some feathers today, so brace yourself for the comments.
It'll be a good time, I'm sure.
Indeed. I think it's something that we do need to discuss for sure, because it's something that I think is a little bit distorted in our culture. And so hopefully we do this topic some justice today and kind of putting some clarity to what true masculinity really is. And so, I was thinking about this episode that we were going to do on masculinity, and it's interesting how the universe just kind of gives you things in your daily life in preparation for stuff like this. And so last weekend, I was coaching my son's baseball team, and he's in a select team, so it's a travel baseball team. And we had our first tournament of the season. And, the boys, we'd practiced quite a bit leading up to this. But let's just say that the performance of our team was abysmal at best. It was an embarrassment for the boys the whole weekend. And it was just, you could tell they were completely defeated. And, we get off the field, and, of course, the head coach gives his 2 cents on his criticisms and critiques of their performance in the game. And there was plenty to go around, right? And he looked at the rest of the coaching staff and he said, does anybody else have anything to say? And I said, I do. And I got down on my knee because I wanted to get on the same level with these boys. And, ultimately what I'm trying to do is teach them how to be young men. 11U baseball is not going to, the performance on an 11U baseball tournament is not going to change the world. It's not going to change their lives. There's no scouts in the stands. It's not a big deal, right? So the fact that we lost all weekend, don't care. I really don't care. But I told them, I got down on my knee and I said, look, fellas, I'm upset because of the lack of effort that was put out on that field. I see there's this pattern with you guys that when you're winning, the effort is there. But when you lose, or when you start to lose, you guys completely shut down on yourselves. And so I need you guys to understand that there's this difference between being a boy and being a man. Boys quit when things are really hard. Men fight no matter what, even if we're losing. That performance does not determine who you are as a man, but what you do in those moments of adversity is what determines you as a man. And so, as we were sitting here talking about this, and I'm like giving these boys a pep talk, and I don't know if they heard me. They're 11 years old, right? They were like, where's the snacks? Let's move on, right? But what I was trying to convey to them, and I think where I want to start our conversation today is, what does it mean to be a man in our society? And it went beyond performance. It went beyond the warrior in battle. To me, it is being able to have your emotions in check and being able to fight through those emotions. One, own them, that they exist, that there is a weakness that exists within you. That's okay. We all have it. And be able to accept it and fight through the adversity of it instead of trying to push it down and get angry and then fight each other or blame each other or point fingers, well, so-and-so didn't make that play and that's why we lost. No, fellas, we win as a team, we lose as a team. So it's interesting, right? Like, I don't know if you have these moments in your life where, like, we're sitting here talking about masculinity and, like, all these memories pop up of, like, yep.
It's happening in my head right now.
So tell me, like, what pops up for you? I'm just curious.
I agree with your assessment of masculinity. I think, and I'm going to give a plug out to the four elements, right? So, like, that fire, that drive, that passion to be better than yourself, right? That's a piece of that masculinity. Like, laying on the couch doing nothing, right, isn't really honored or viewed as particularly great. But like a guy out there making money, or making his business or doing his passion, man, no matter what that is, we see that in people. We're like, oh, that's awesome, right? So having that passion, here's what I think masculine passion, just to be able to drive forward. Balance of emotion, absolutely. You've got to have balance of mind also with that. A balance of body, again, I think it's definitely a piece. And then that spiritual path. I think that life is just easier if you honor a spiritual path, whatever that looks like for you. So yeah, masculinity is really complicated, and I think a lot of times it gets watered down in our society, or mislabeled or
Mm-hmm.
misconstrued, like toxic masculinity and these things where you know a man just being masculine and in his masculine frame is viewed as not healthy or not well. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, I think, with looking at the masculinity and the femininity, but truthfully it's a balance of the two. That makes truly masculine men masculine. They've integrated both of those qualities.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So let's break it down for people, right? So when I've talked in the past about, masculinity and what it means as a man to, let's just say, provide. Let's just start there, right? Because
All
I
right.
think a lot of men will go there and say, hey, look, my value as a man is my provision to my family, to my spouse, to my children, right? And we'll stop at that provision is a financial provision, right? That I go, I have a good job, I work hard, I bring home the bread, and I provide house, cars, clothing, food, et cetera, for my family. And that provision is great, right? But I think our provision as men goes beyond that. And I think the piece that is missing amongst a lot of men, and where we really have to do some work as men, is the provision of emotional provision, right? So, and what I mean by that is, I think I would define emotional provision as holding space for an emotion. So let's say, example, my wife comes to me and she's upset because I, you know, didn't do the dishes, or, which doesn't happen in my house because I'm perfect, right? Um, don't believe it.
Aren't we all?
Right. So, she's upset that I didn't do the dishes. And, you know, to have that emotional provision is be able to sit in that space and let her just be mad at me, not take that personally, or that she's had a bad day. And so she's coming in and she's coming in hot. That's not about me. And even if it is about me, it's still not about me because it's her emotion. And so we are able to hold that space for that emotion and for them, not take it personally, also have our emotions in check and understand ourselves so that we can then emotionally provide a secure space for our family. And that's, I think, the gap that we really need to close.
It agreed. And we look at society, and we're allowed to display anger generally as men, right? A man making a scene in a restaurant, perfectly okay, raising his voice, slamming some stuff, whatever, even walking out, not a big deal. A guy quietly crying or sobbing to himself in the corner, it's going to be a big deal, right?
Mm.
It's going to turn some heads, right? And I think with those dynamics, boiling men down to a financial status, right, is a recipe for failure, because we're saying that, hey man, a guy is only valuable if he makes X number of widgets or X number of thousands of dollars. And the system doesn't work, because then the question is, how much money is enough? So is every man valuable that makes 50K on up, or what's the number, right?
Hmm.
And we know, like, again, having that spiritual path and honoring that spiritual path, our value is not in the money that we make, right? And I think that what we're really talking about is that masculine ability to create order out of chaos
Mm.
and to hold that order in the midst of overwhelming chaos and stand your ground. Again, when the wife's mad at you for not doing the dishes, right? And then you realize that, oh, I actually do deserve this because I have, right? And you start doing it in your head and you're like, wow, I'm the problem.
Right.
Okay, cool. So now you're getting pinged at by the person you love, right? And to stand that ground and not go back with in emotion, anger, or something, and to be like, yeah, ooh, cool. I kind of deserve this. That was a wake up call. You gave a wake up call to the 11U team, right?
Yeah, I hope.
Hey guys, right. I get what you're saying. You're like, hey, if you listen to the voice in your head that says, oh, they're winning, we'll never catch up, then you won't. And that's the path you'll walk, and you will give up when things get hard. And to be hard, you got to do hard stuff. So what happens if you have a bunch of, and again, it's fun. And you're right, it is fun. But sometimes even during all of that, we need to be informed that, hey, this is a better way of being, right? Because if we listen to that voice, that negative voice that says, oh, it's too hard, quit. Oh, don't bother. Sit on the couch, eat Cheetos. Cool. That's what we're going to get in life. I had a moment when I was kind of thinking of like masculinity, right? And I was like kind of weighing it because it's so multifaceted. It brought me back to this time in the military. And I was a company commander. I was responsible for a bunch of guys, and there was a couple other company commanders, and we had to put our guys out on leave. And the long and the short is, my paperwork came up late because of a bunch of stuff that was going on, and then the other company commanders pulled me aside and said, hey, all of our stuff's kind of late too because of situations. What we're going to do is just kind of say everybody's in the area for leave. And that's cool. But if anybody actually is out of the area, gets hurt, if there's anything goes wrong, then these soldiers aren't actually covered, right? They don't get the full military benefit. It's a mess, right? The right answer is to do these forms and submit them. Well, the person that has to submit these forms is our colonel. And already he's not in a good mood because of situations, right? So everybody, right? And you see how all of this snowballs, right? But it's not about me, right? I'm just do the best you can. Have the fire to, as a guy, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going, right? So then I had a moment, right? Do I just scurry underneath the radar, avoid the butt chewing that I'm going to get because, oh man, he's going to destroy me? Then the question is, so I made the hard choice, right? I said, you know what? I'm going to turn these forms in, right? And I'm going to face the heat rounds. To pick up the phone and call the other people and say, hey, man, I'm letting you know that I'm going to do this so that you can react. Like this is going to happen. Figure out what your angle is going to be. Mm-hmm. And then to do that multiple times. And every time, you can imagine what that phone call was like because that was a giant coming down the pipe. Wow. Marched into the colonel's office and he just started tearing me apart, ripping into me. And I sat there and I'm at attention. And when I tell you, all those movies you've seen about the military, when they get in your face and dress you down, hey, that really does happen, guys. Wow, it was brutal. And I'm just standing at attention, just getting wrecked. And I'm like, for about 15 minutes, and the phone starts ringing because he starts figuring out, wait a minute. And he starts peeling the onion back. He picks up the phone. He starts calling the other commanders and starts dragging them into the office. And then he finally, everything, again, I haven't been allowed to speak. One-sided conversation. And then the gears start turning, right? And he realizes what I did. And he realizes I came forward and what's happening there because he doesn't have their forms. Pick which way you want to be in this world, man. If you don't stand by your own beliefs and if you don't stand in your own power, no one's going to do it for you. If you listen to that voice that says you're not strong enough, quit and give up, you will. Go forward. Have that passion.
No, that's good. I think there's so many men that don't know their path and don't know their direction because I think we've been distorted along the way. You brought up this, it's not about you. I think you'd said that. And I was like, oh, I wrote that down because that's good, right? I feel like we need to like tattoo this on our forehead sometimes as men. Hey, men, it's not about you. The world doesn't revolve around you. And here's what I mean by that. As men, we're fixers, aren't we?
All day long, twice on
We are.
Sundays.
I will tinker, I will fix. That is what I do. If it's broken, bring it to me. I got it. And if I can't fix it, I got a YouTube video to figure it out, right? We are going to
Logic.
fix stuff around here. Try to fix an emotion. And I think sometimes that's where we get stuck as men, is we don't really have a good grasp of our own emotions outside of anger. And now we're trying to fix an emotion we don't understand in our spouse or in our children or in our family, right? And it usually ends in an epic implosion, doesn't it? And I think we have to understand, like, look, guys, we're not responsible for those emotions. Please, it's not about you, but we are responsible to those emotions. And the first step in being responsible to those emotions is being responsible to our own and understanding what our own emotions are. But the problem is they've been beaten out of us for so long, from little boys on up, that we're not allowed to have them. So what do we do there?
We as guys, right? Society's, beats the emotions out of us, so to speak, right? So then we're in this weird situation when we're adults and we're on our own. And then it's like we see these emotions in women and we're like, oh, okay, or in other people, or we feel a way and we like classify it. But the real truth is exactly what you had said earlier. We don't know what we're really feeling.
Right.
And at that moment, like sifting through your own trash, you only kind of see your own trash. So it only makes sense to you. You got to go get a guy you trust, get a therapist. You have to. I find the easiest path is to truly just talk to somebody that you trust and that, got rapport with, that will hold space for you so that you can truthfully just take all your emotions, throw them out on the table and sort through them, because some are going to be valid, right? Boundaries and things like this. Some are going to just be like stuff from the past. And I think one of the important things about having female, relationships is they're really good at that.
Very.
They've got that, right? So they're really good at that. So if you can find a female that you trust, right? And that's why, get it, finding a good woman, finding a good man works out well for both partners, because again, you can learn from each other in those ways.
Yeah.
I really feel that women do a really great job. The female energy does a great job of teaching us about our emotions, because it's, for the most part, I agree with you, it's been trained out of most men, or attempted to be trained out.
Oh, it has been. I mean, I think as we grow up, that's, a little boy falls down and he skins his knee. What do we tell him? You're fine. You're good. Rub some dirt on it and move on, right? Little girl falls down. It's a completely different story. And so, yeah, it is completely beaten out of us. And so, like, then we run into these distorted thoughts and we're trained that these emotions are not safe. And so, therefore, vulnerability is not safe. And vulnerability is weakness instead of a strength. And I think that's where we run into an issue with men truly understanding what masculinity really is.
Yeah, it's having that balance, or that ability to be vulnerable, right?
It's hard.
Yeah, I mean yeah, and I guess, and I say it loosely, because it's the appearance is like I would appear to be vulnerable, but the truth is it's strong. It takes more strength to be vulnerable than it does to be, right? You get what I'm saying?
It takes a lot more strength to be vulnerable, because
So
now I'm facing judgment.
right, and all of that. So to be vulnerable, like to be truthfully vulnerable, is taking the strong way out, right? And that feeling of being uncomfortable. What I find in my life, man, a lot of these feelings that we feel, like if you lean into discomfort, it's amazing how your life will get better. Don't feel like going to the gym? Get up and go to the gym. Don't feel like meditate? Go freaking meditate. Don't feel like, I don't care, like make a schedule, stick to it. That's one of the things the military taught me, man. You have to drive yourself for excellence. And part of the thing about being a good man is just to be strive to be a better human for yourself, but for everyone around you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's interesting you bring that up. I do the hard thing, right? Growing up, I've always been a very emotional person. And, growing up as a man in this society, being emotional is not considered strength. And so I learned pretty early on, like, wow, I've got this really innate side of me. It's natural, but it's not valued. So let's beat it out of you, right? There's something wrong with you. And I spent a lot of years kind of shifting to one side of this whole masculine, feminine energy. I shifted as far as I could to the masculine side. And when I did, yes, I wasn't being judged for being emotional, but I was being judged for being a dick. And I was just a dick to everybody. Right. And so then I shift back over time, trying to kind of bring that emotional side back in. And I felt better, but I still was receiving judgment. So I was really confused by that. Right. And, unfortunately, this dynamic cost me a marriage because I was in a marriage where, the person that I was with basically told me, "You're too emotional. I just need you to be less." And so I did. And it's not that I got angry, I got shut down because I had to shut down now both sides of me, right? Because I knew I didn't want to be fully masculine, like 100% of one thing is a bad thing, right? I needed some balance, but balance wasn't really valued there. And ultimately, at the end, when I started to kind of shift back and work on myself, um, she didn't like what she had. And so I meet my now wife, Steph, and it's a funny story. Um, I remember on our first date, you talk about doing the hard thing. I'll land my plane, but here's what I'm thinking, right? Doing the hard thing for me was being able to be vulnerable and raw and honest with my emotion at all times. That is very hard for people to do. And guess what? I may make it look easy, but it is very hard for me to do as well. So I'm sitting there first date, right? And she's talking about how she loves how, alpha I am and how strong and this alpha energy, this alpha masculine energy that I have. And she loves it. And I was like, oh, see, here's the thing. And this is why I did the hard thing. At some point, you're going to consider that I'm a pussy. I promise you that. And she was like, no, no, not you. You're so alpha. You're so masculine. And I was like, yeah, but you haven't seen a side of me yet that I know is going to come out at some point. And when it does, you're going to consider me a pussy and you'll change your mind. Because this was the dynamic that had existed in my life up to this point, right? So fast forward a couple months later, guess what happens? We get into an argument. My little emotional side comes out, right? And I don't hide it. Doing the hard thing again, right? I'm going beyond anger into what the real emotion truly is, and that's hard. And it's very vulnerable
Yeah.
to put yourself open because you're opening yourself up for hurt, right? And at the end of it, we're kind of debriefing the discussion, if you will. And I said, "So, do you remember that conversation we had a couple months ago where I said you're going to consider I'm a pussy? How do we stand on that?" And she goes, "No, I could see why you would think that, but I actually consider your willingness to be vulnerable and emotional as more strength." And that's when it, like, my mind blew and I was like, okay, maybe I've arrived, right? If we look at what true masculinity is, it is a balance between this overwhelming power that we would consider masculinity to be with the softening of this feminine energy and bringing it together to a space of confidence. Hard to do.
I, yeah, exactly. It's hard to do well. I almost like hearing the stories and then looking at things that have happened. I almost feel like there's a part of us, like, and maybe it's just training from childhood that we can shut down, right? Like be a different way. So like, right, like these people that we meet tell us to be a way, and then we try it, and we just, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is I really feel like part of like this masculine frame that we have is hardwired with just the biology that is us. I remember times when it's like, times of like fight, flight. I think part of what we experience is hardwired emotions that we don't necessarily need now in the moment anymore, right? It's like, so in most people's lives, they're not in a situation of like taking fire or getting rocketed or mortared or anything like that, right? It's not true life or death. Now it happens, like car wrecks and
Hmm.
things like
Hmm.
that. So like when your boss is yelling at you and you get all these emotions kicked up, that old emotional system, right? It's not useful, right? It may not be useful at that moment. So like part of it is like we just have to learn to drive on at times. And like I understand like we can't always deal with it in the spot, but sometimes you drive on, do the best you can, and then later, like what you did is decompressing after the moment. Like to have the strength to really let somebody that could hurt you tremendously, to let like, hey man, this is really bothering me, here's my issues, and I don't care, I feel a way, and you can see that
Yeah.
plainly that this what you're doing is causing me pain, right? To be that vulnerable as a guy to somebody, to me that's an amazing sign of love for that other person,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then absolute courage, man.
No, it's good. That mutual respect, right? It's we're talking about temperance now. Being able to
Yeah.
temper those big emotions, right? Like, and we all have them. We all have them, right? Like, at the end of the day, my story is that, well, part of my story is that, my mom left. I was 8 years old. She just left. And she never really came back. And so I have this really deep abandonment wound that is primal. I mean, this is a primal wound. The one person that is programmed to love you in life didn't. And so now I'm sitting here in this argument with this person who says she loves me. And it feels like she's going to leave too. That if I don't fix this, she's going to leave too. And what I had to learn is in this, true masculine. My mom can't abandon me anymore. It's already been done. And so if Steph chooses to leave me, then so be it. I will survive. I have survived much worse. But what if I just sit in this moment, sit in this space, allow space for this emotion, and then see how this shakes out? Worst case scenario, she leaves. Best case scenario, we both learn. Isn't that what true masculinity really is that emotional provision is for providing that space for that emotion for both of us?
Yeah, instead of shrinking away from it like so many of us do because of fear of repercussions or being or of being
Yeah,
hurt.
or torching the
I
earth, right? Or becoming that abusive male that says, if you're a threat to me, I'll just beat you. That's not strength. That is the epitome of weakness if you have to beat a weaker being because of your insecurity.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, it's going back to having somebody that's 100% in that masculine frame. You're just truthfully unpleasant to be around, and could drift into the realm of being a hazard, right? Just
Mhm.
being unsafe. And it's that temperance between the two. Yeah, I look back and I'm like, my dad, man, he was like, so my mom was bipolar growing up.
Mm.
So growing up, man, I saw some pretty wild stuff, right? And my dad had this amazing ability. He would be like the eye of calm in the center of the hurricane, and just things are going wrong, and he's just doing this stuff. And when you look at that level of confidence, of that level of control, no matter what's going wrong, it's amazing to see, right? And it wasn't till much older that I realized, those nights that I got up and I saw, like, my dad staring at the television, looking at white snow and things like that, that made me realize, like, again, we've got to have a balance of the two, right? Because he was pretty military and etc. So
Mm,
again, that feminine energy balance is needed. And the wounds, again, like, so wounds that are created in the past can resurface again, like when we're being vulnerable and talking to people,
sure,
right?
sure.
And this can be held in a therapist space or guy to guy or to a spouse. And again, being able to stand in that masculine frame, take the heat of your own emotions, right? And figure out, like, what do I need to change? So either A, I don't feel this way, if that's what you're trying to do, or B, so that I can just be better, resolve this, and to stand in that fire and sort it out instead of shying away from it and ignoring it or compartmentalizing it.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think that's good. This whole standing in the fire, right? I picture assertiveness. And I think something to clarify, I was just thinking this notion of temperance sometimes is misconstrued as silence. And I believe truly that when we talk about the downfall of masculinity in our culture, it is not the feminist movement that has killed masculinity. It is that men have become silent. And that's not temperance, right? That's not the temperance we're talking about. Yes, there is a time to be silent, but there's temperance is being assertive. That I know when to speak and I know when not to speak, right? Like you in front of your colonel.
Exactly.
Don't speak,
Yep.
right? There's a time and a place for it, but that we don't ignore our own boundaries and be assertive to those and not give up too much of ourselves. And I think the problem is that in a vacuum of leadership, somebody's going to take over, right? And so if men are silent and they've decided, hey, I'm going to disconnect myself from my family out of some insecurity, but I'm going to provide for them financially, and that's my making of a man, you have sidelined yourself into your life and you've given all of the leadership to her, and she doesn't want all that. And she's going to start to disrespect you, which she should, because you are casually observing your life now. So we as men need to assertively step forward and say, I'm an active participant in this. And sometimes that means doing the hard thing, right?
Or making giant mistakes or taking huge
For
risks or
sure.
whatever it is that needs to happen, having the courage to accept change and be okay with it. So many people tell us a way of being that's going to make us happy, right? And guys, everybody, I hope, find yourself, right? Find what values get you going, find what really truthfully motivates you, and then go do that. If you like the military, do the military thing, try that out. If you like, making a bunch of money, then go, sure, go do that. But on your way to whatever it is that's going to make you happy, you're going to get discomfort. And I would say face it on the spot and find people along the way that you can talk to that will call you on your crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times in my life, like, I'm the problem, right?
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
is. And again, when we try to go 100% masculine, right? We're just, for a lot of us that can drift along the spectrum, we're hiding another problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did it when I was in the military, and I did all the and all, do what's right, do what's, all that other, but and it was a way of being, and I enjoyed it, and it taught me a lot about myself. But I'm a much different person now. We have to find our own path, and I think a lot of men they're like, okay, I'm not going to be a millionaire, so I'm not going to bother. You get this again, it's that mental mind, that negative mental mind chatter. And I think it holds you in your spot. Like, hey, I'm going to play, truthfully, I see this as an issue. Like, I'm going to play a bunch of video games, right?
Mm-hmm.
cool, relax, do everything. But again, temperance, to have a balance, right? So play your games, but do something to make you better, right? So it's the drive to be better than you are tomorrow, man. It's so important, and to walk your own path and be okay with change and okay with making mistakes. I had this,
Mm.
I had here, want to talk about things that are like embarrassing or shameful. I'll tell you this story. I was thinking back when you were talking earlier, and I was in the military at this time, and oh my goodness. So um I went, I'm changing names in my head real fast. We were we were doing a field training exercise. So it's like a mock up before we headed off to Afghanistan, and we're doing that. Circumstances outside of my control, I got selected to be an adjutant. And if you met military Andrew, really super alpha, cursed a lot. Like it was, I really wasn't good at being somebody's secretary, right? And I was good at logistics, so I was good at that piece, but the PR and the etiquette, not so good. But anyway, I tried the job, and I got some people to help me. And the long and the short is we were doing evolution. So I had a Humvee set up for a convoy, and we had all that set up, and they had all these gear set up, and we have these little like laser guns, and we go out and we do maneuvers, right? So the colonel had to do his maneuver that morning. So we roll out there, and so that kind of sets the stage. We're in this building, and I'm like the colonel's secretary. So my guys are outside. They've got 4 different Humvees, and they're getting everything ready and doing all that. I go talk to, and then I'm in my office, and I checked on my guys, and the colonel's in there. And when I went back to the office, I'm in the office for a bit, and I'm goofing off. And the colonel, I notice he starts getting ready, and I'm like, okay. So we go outside, so he starts getting his armor on, and I'm like, oh, whoa, whoa. And he's like, yeah, I want to take off early and make a stop on the way to the planned stop. I'm like, okay, no problem. I go outside, and true story, my guys had loaned out our 50 cal mount to another unit, and they've been it. And so my guys are on there like banging on this 50 cal mount, trying to get this stuff working. And the radio in the colonel's vehicle has been shorting out. So the electrician's in there wrenching on that. So we're not really ready to leave. And I'm like, oh crud, right? So we come out, and the colonel's there. We walk out, and I'm like, hey guys, he's on his way. Like, I don't care if you have to hold the gun mount, do whatever, again, complete the mission, do whatever you got to do. He's on his way. So we take off, and we start leaving. So the sergeant major at the time's like, hey, I got this. I know where we're going, and blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? Sergeant major didn't talk to the colonel. So the colonel wanted to go one place. The sergeant was going somewhere else, and our triptych was where the sergeant major was trying to go, but he wasn't tracking with the colonel, right? So we get in the thing, and the convoy starts leaving, and the sergeant major takes front, and he's driving the convoy. Well, they don't make the turn, so I hear the colonel get on his radio, and he's like, hey, and it cuts out. Oh my goodness. We drive to where we're supposed to be, and the whole time I'm like, oh my goodness, there's nothing I can do about this, right? I just is. We stop at the correct spot early now. Colonel gets out, starts yelling and screaming at me and all this other stuff. And there's a bunch of people around. I'm just getting dressed down again. I'm like, oh my goodness. Again, it's not about you, right? The universe had a better plan today than taking care of me that day. So that's okay. So he's yelling and screaming, and he walks off, and he goes in his building. So I'm like, wow, this is not how I wanted to start my morning. So I get the electrician. I'm like, hey man, you got to fix this vehicle. And by the way, you're going to ride in the back seat with the colonel, who's hot, mad for the rest of the day if you don't get the radio fixed. I'm done playing this game. I'm sick of getting yelled at. So then in the midst of all this, then the range people are like, hey, you have to move the vehicles because you parked too close. And I'm like, oh my goodness, man, come on, guys. Like, give me some slack. So we had to move in the vehicles about a mile down the road. So I'm like, I'm learning at this point. So I'm like, all right, I take me and the medic and I go and I meet the colonel at where I dropped him off. When the colonel's done with his meeting, I was going to bring him from there to where the Humvees are because I'm not allowed to bring him next to the building. Problem solved. So I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. And I get a call on the radio and the colonel's like, Edge, where are you at? And I'm like, I'm at the building where you walked out. I'm like, where are you, sir? And he's like, I'm at the Humvees. I'm like, oh, shoot. So me and the medic, we go running back. And we get in the vehicle. Get in the convoy. I get yelled at again because I made the convoy. It was just, right? Like I couldn't buy a vowel, right? Get in the convoy, get yelled at, and we drive back, right? Colonel goes in. He's eating his lunch. And I'm like, get me another electrician. Get me somebody that can fix this radio. I'm so over this. I'm done. At this time, I'm like, I get a backup vehicle and I have it pre-staged ready to go just in case. So I've got the colonel's actual Humvee, which is the one, his baby. And then I've got just some loaner, figuring stuff out, right? Make a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Go back in. Colonel's like, all right, cool. We're done with lunch. We're going to roll out. Let me go check on my guys. So I got about 20 minutes till we're about to leave. The 4 Humvees are staged up. I walk outside and the colonel's Humvee is actively on fire. There's flames coming out of the Humvee. My guys are on it with fire extinguishers and there's a lot of yelling and screaming going on back and forth trying to get it taken care of.
Oh my God.
This is my day. I cannot make this up, right? Drive on, right? So I'm like, oh my goodness. Take that vehicle. We move the convoy because that vehicle ain't going anywhere. So we move the convoy. I'm like, no problem. Get the backup vehicle, put it in the colonel's spot. I'll explain. So I told the colonel we had a problem with it. There's a short or something at this point. I figured a radio short. Caused sparks, fire, blah, blah, blah. We got everything sorted out. And I got a backup Humvee. He's hot already. He's already yelled at me a couple of times. So here he goes. And now, the colonel is a big old boy. He big. Like, so this really big guy in really heavy body armor, right, rolls in, gets in his Humvee. And he's like, what's wrong with this seat? Because he gets in, the seat reclines back, all gangster stuff. And he's like, what's wrong with this seat? The seat broke.
No.
The colonel rolls into the back seat, gets out of the vehicle, takes the seat, grabs the seat, goes, what the hell? Adjutant rips the seat out and throws it on the ground, right? And I'm just like, at this moment, I was like, I'm going to actually get my ass beat. He's going to physically beat the hell out of me at this point. He was just so mad, right? Take the seat and he threw it down. And then he took about a second and he taught me a lot in this moment. And he composed himself. And he looked at me and he's like, get this sorted out, man. And he walked away, right? And it was cool. He got in a second. So long story short, I go on some maneuvers and I come back, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. So this was we didn't go on the convoy because I'm done. He gave up. He was like, no. And we missed that convoy. It's a big deal. It's not, it's a big deal. Right. And I'm like, again, so I have to run another mission. So I take my guys, we go run our maneuvers, really awesome. Come back and I go into the talk area and I'm like, and I see, some random people and they're like, hey man, heard about your day. And half the people saw me get my butt chewed a few times. They're like, man, I know you're having a rough day. Everything okay? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I'm cool. Right. When everybody's kind of like, meh. After about the third person, I was like, okay, I'm missing something because I got this weird moment. And they're like, have you talked to the XO yet? I'm like, no, I just got back from the maneuver, right? And they're like, oh, you need to go talk to the XO. I'm like, oh, crap. Now, in this moment, I got my butt chewed, but we're in the military. It happens, right? I walk in. The XO is at his computer. And I'm like, sir, yeah, Lieutenant Taylor reporting is ordered. And he swivels around and he leans back. And at that moment, I was like, oh, it dawned on me. This is the first time in my life that I've ever been fired. I was like, it was a moment for me. And I was like, wow, this is what this feels like. Absolute, just, again, failure, right? And I was like, And he sighed. And I was like, I'm fired, huh, sir? I just said it. I'm just going to save it. And he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, look, man, go to your rack, get some sleep. Just do, come back tomorrow. We'll get you something else. We'll find a job that, you fit with, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, man, right? I'm just beat up and all these things and all these negative loops, right? So I go back to my rack and there's another lieutenant over there and he's like getting ready to go run, right? And I got all these negative thoughts and all these self-worth issues and all this stuff, right? So what's the best thing I can do? Let me go run. So me and this lieutenant, we take off and we go run, like, I think it was like a 5-mile loop. And he's like, oh yeah. And that's like, we're talking and we're running. And I'm like, man, this is great. This is what I need. Just kind of get all this energy out. So we're running and we're making some turns and we're just talking back and forth. And I'm like, man, you run this a lot? He's like, yeah, I've run this every day. I run it, in the mornings. I'm like, oh my God, you have it. Some people get an easier job, so they got more time, right? So I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So then I'm running and we're on this road, right? And I got the fence to my left. So I know I'm on the fob because it's the fence, right? And I see this convoy way off in the distance. Now, I know the schedules because, well, for that day anyway, right? Because I'd memorized them in the morning. And I'm like, the colonel's that's not his schedule. Or sorry, it's not his. I'm like, whose convoy would that be? And I'm like, why would they be on that road? They're rolling. I was like, there's some weirdness. So I look, and I tell the lieutenant, I'm like, hey man, I think we should turn around. So we start, now we're about a mile out, right? So we start turning around, we start running back, and it was a sergeant major's convoy, and he rolls up, and he's like, Adge, what are you doing? I'm like, PT and Sergeant Major. And he's like, you're outside the wire. And I'm like, no, I'm not. The fence is right there. He's like, you're on the wrong side of the fence. And I'm like, oh, hell. I had followed somebody else and they had led me. Oh, yeah. And he's like, oh, my God. And they were like, when you get back, again, there's a big deal. And I was like, how could this day get any worse? This day can't. I was like, what the hell? So I have to go see the colonel. The XO's like, just come see me instead. Please don't go see the colonel. I'm going to go talk to the colonel. You might actually get killed. Like, just stop. I go see the XO and he's like, gave me my punishment and my new job and was like, go away. And I'm going to tell you, when I look at this story, right, and now it's out there, so I hope everybody got a good laugh. But some things are just out of our control, man. Yeah. I was stuck in a miserable job that I hated in the military, right? And you can't quit. It's not a thing, right? In a miserable job. And I did the best I could. Truthfully, I did. And just stuff happens. And you know what? I moved on. I did other jobs in the military that I loved so much and enjoyed and learned from everything. But even in the moments where I'm like, man, I'm going to get beat up, or all these moments, standing in the emotion and just being like, okay, I just accept this. Like, this guy's 3 times my size. I guess I'm due for a butt beating, right? So, but just leaning into it, and yeah, it was a thing.
Yeah, leaning into it's hard. We want to circumvent, we want to go around, and sometimes the best,
or control.
Yeah, I think sometimes the best thing to do is to go right into the storm, right? There's this difference between cows and buffalo. See, when a storm comes, cows will run away from the storm, and they'll keep running and keep running and keep running, right, in hopes of beating the storm. Of course, the storm eventually catches up to them, right? And by the time the storm's caught up to them, they're exhausted. And so now they're exhausted and they've gotten beaten down by the storm. It's like a double whammy, right? And then you've got the buffalo, and the buffalo, they'll walk into the storm. And yes, the storm can be scary, but once they get into the storm, they recognize, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I've conserved my energy. And I don't have to stay in the storm as long because I walked into it. And when I think about masculinity is being the buffalo.
All that, yes, absolutely.
It's walking into it and doing the hard thing. And sometimes that means doing the hard thing and facing ourselves.
Absolutely. Like it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail, but here's what's not okay: to not learn from them.
Mm,
When you make mistakes, man, fix it, make it better, because the patterns that we lay down, when they're going to be these subconscious patterns in our head. And if we agree to this, masculinity is only what somebody told me, or whatever that is, then that's how you're going to
right.
act, man. You need the full spectrum.
Yeah, it's more than just power. It's temperance. It's self-control, right? That, I teach my children, when you make a mistake, it's not if, it's a when. And there's going to be a bunch of wins in your life, right? But when you make a mistake, or, yeah, own it. Own your portion of it. Don't deflect responsibility. Own it. Apologize and then move on. And I think sometimes, you talk about this whole notion of toxic masculinity. We have a bunch of men out there who are deeply insecure because, one, they may not be able to own it because that's too vulnerable. I get that. They won't be able to apologize because, again, that's too vulnerable. And
Mhm.
they certainly don't move on because now they're just too busy beating themselves up. And so their notion of power then is to beat those around them down to lift themselves up. Well, guess what's that? That's not strength. Yes, that is toxic, but that's not the masculinity that we're speaking of. It's about balance, right? It's being able to balance the feminine and the masculine energy, if we want to call it that. Yes?
Yeah. It, exactly that. It's the balancing of the emotions within that masculine, feminine, being able to sit in your emotions, realize, hey, they can't kill me. Feelings aren't facts, but they are pointers to things that need attention, right? And
Mm-hmm.
deal with them, right? Talk to somebody, do what you got to do, work on yourself, work on these emotions. One, so you truthfully just feel better, but two, so you can learn whatever lesson is written in there and then move on from that. And again, you get better. And then it allows you, once you kind of conquer the beast within, so to speak, then that allows you to since you're taming the beast within, you can show other people how to do that by your virtue of being. Again, like spouse coming after you with something, with had a bad day and just coming at you with a bunch of stuff, but it's like, it's just her and she just needs to vent. Let me listen. There's no problem to fix. She just needs
Yeah,
to get
and
at it,
and
get the
hold
venom out.
space for that, right?
Being able
Like
to
if we
see the
think
world
about,
correctly.
to me,
Yeah.
a great example of like a really good masculine energy is Rip on the show Yellowstone. Um, and Rip is that guy, if anybody's watched this show, that every guy wants to be and every woman wants to be with. He's the man's man. He goes out, he gets dirty, he works hard, he doesn't complain one bit. He just gets his job done. And when Beth, his ultimately wife, um, comes at him, and she's a bit much, right? But when she comes at him, he just holds space for it. Doesn't take it personally, just holds space. I know who you are. I know who I am. It's not a threat, and we're going to get past this, right? Um, Now, is it okay to be assertive and to hold your ground and to say, "Hey, look, I understand that you're angry right now, but if you're being dishonored, hold your ground and say, "Hey, look, it's not okay for you to talk to me that way." But flip that too. It's not okay for us to talk to the people in our lives in a dishonoring tone either. So check yourself. So again, going back to that, temperance is assertiveness, but he does a really good job of that, and it's like a really good picture of what that this true masculinity is. Now he's got some issues for sure, and probably needs to go talk to somebody, but you know we can't all be perfect.
I think a lot of I think a lot of men, even our society in general, we shy away from emotions. And it's a really good point, is for a guy to be able to stand in your frame, your emotional frame, while a woman or maybe a friend, right, feels a way and is emotionally discharging stuff on you, crying, screaming, whatever that is. Because I really feel what we need to do is be able to hold that space again for each other, right?
Correct.
So the female in your story the man held space for her. She was able to heal and move on past whatever that altercation was, right? But how often are men just told to keep driving on versus, hey, where is a man that I can trust and have rapport with that will hold this space for me so I can work through some stuff that maybe happened in the past or maybe today, right?
Right. Yeah. We've got to be able to heal ourselves from the inside, heal our hearts, heal our minds, clear those distorted thoughts so that we can have this emotional provision, this spiritual provision for the people around us, and not just stop at a paycheck. We're more than a dollar as men. We are much more than that. And we need to give ourselves more credit. And it starts with us.
No, absolutely. And it's not only it's looking within ourselves and seeing our own value, but also finding out what drives us so that we can be the way we want to be individually in as we move forward. And again, finding a way to coexist in this world, monetarily and all that, but not making money the reason that somebody's with you. Yeah. The value
Right.
of a man is not in the dollars he makes, it's his way of being.
Yeah, absolutely. I leave with this, that confidence is arrogance under control. That's the temperance, right? There is
Beautiful.
always going to be a layer of cockiness that comes with confidence, but there's also a layer of humility as well. And if we can have that under control, then we are truly confident. If we're truly confident, we can be truly vulnerable. And so that's the goal, right? So hopefully we've done this topic some justice today.
Yeah.
I guess we'll wait to hear in the comments, but
Let us know how we
thank you,
did.
Andrew, for joining me on this, and there'll be more to come, so stay tuned.
Thank you so much for having me and have a great day.
Thank you guys for listening. We are honored to be a part of your wellness journey. For more content and info, follow us, The Elements Wellness, on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on our website, theelementswellness.com.